Good morning and welcome. Lovely to have you all here on this blustery day. We're here today to talk about how to create a compelling employee value proposition. So hopefully you are in the right room. If you're not, this is probably worth knowing about anyway, so don't leave, stay, join us. And I think we all know that as we move into a services economy, just how important a good employee value proposition is, because, you know, this product, my experience of it is based on the quality, the processes, the technology that went into it. But with services, it's about the people that I meet every day. So your EVP in the services industry, and many of you would be from the services industry. In fact, our panelists, who I'm going to introduce in a second, are all from the services industry. Your EVP has an absolute impact on your customer value proposition. And in these highly competitive times, that's what we need to survive. So let me just introduce them. Firstly, we've got Liz Pound over here from Epworth Health. Liz looks after workforce development. And Epworth Health we all know the challenges of healthcare. Epworth, like most organizations in the sector's complex, big, lots of interesting things going on. They've got 2,000 doctors and specialists, 5,000 clinical and support staff. They've got a dozen facilities, I think 9 hospitals, Liz, somewhere, 8, okay. And there have been quite a few significant workforce challenges that Liz has had to deal with, and she'll be telling us her story very shortly. We've got Taryn over there. Taryn Evans is the People and Culture Business Partner with Melbourne and Olympics Park Trust. And many of you will know that it's probably one of the most iconic sporting venues in the world, where we host the Australian Open, where we do lots of entertainment. And we've got the Rod Laver Arena that can take 15,000 people, the Hisense Arena that can take 10,000 people, and Amy Park that can take 30,000. And the challenges of having security, catering, cleaning, and making sure that those events work and that people have a great experience is all down to the people. And what's also interesting about Taryn's environment is much of that is outsourced. And so where does the responsibility end in terms of making sure that the people who are going to impact your customer experience are the right people? And Taryn might touch on that. If she doesn't, we'll ask her questions about that. And then we've got Ben Lawrence, who's the Chief Human Resources Officer for Wesfarmers. So there will not be many people that you meet whose organization employs 200,000 people and who has a payroll of 8 billion. That's B. B for Bertie, 8 billion. So that's what Ben has to look after. And it's going to be quite interesting to, with that scope of responsibility, how does a top 10 organization like Wesfarmers think about people? How does it invest in its people? How does it make sure that its people drive a great customer experience? So Ben's going to give us some insight into that. As I said, looks after workforce development at Epworth Health. Big health organisation, I think the largest not-for-profit in Victoria. Big, complex organisation, multiple facilities. And Liz's job is to make sure that there are enough people to do the job at the quality required. And Liz, you've been doing a lot of work in this space around employee value proposition and how you attract and retain the right people. So to tell your story, could you maybe just give us a bit about your business context, what's happening, and what's triggered your work around this?
Epworth Healthcare. We have 8 sites, soon to have 9. We're in an environment where we're building a hospital in Geelong that's due to open its doors on 1st of July next year. Epworth Richmond is undergoing a huge redevelopment, so that's due to open the redeveloped area 1 February. So what we find is that our current workforce of 5,500 is likely to be around about 7,000 to 7,500 within the next 18 to 24 months. So we have an aggressive growth strategy. Buildings are going along very, very well. In fact, we'll probably deliver ahead of time. So for us, it's about, okay, we've got this plan, the services, how are we going to get the people and how are we going to get the quality of people that we want. So we knew that Epworth had a very strong brand in the market as a healthcare provider. But the question for us in terms of the HR team was, what's the compelling reason why people would come and work with us and stay with us, particularly in the health professional space, because they're our critical shortage areas. So that was actually the burning question, and it was very interesting because there's an assumption I found within the business that, oh, it's Epworth, we've got a strong brand, of course people would want to work with us. So, but we were internally asking the question, but why? And context being that a lot of the people we're looking to attract to come in and fill those roles, if you like, are actually already employed elsewhere. They're at the Cabrinis, they're at the St Vincent's Public, they might be interstate at a provider. So what is going to be the compelling reason that they're going to upstate and actually come across and join Epworth? So in order to understand that and understand how we could target that market, how it was about developing a compelling value proposition that would make people think twice about where they were and what they'd like to join. So our journey to that was about going out to tender and actually looking at who we could partner with to actually help us develop and crystallise our EVP. There were two sides to it. We had the EVP development, and then we needed to also make sure that we were translating that into a creative campaign as well. So from the EVP perspective, we undertook a lot of research with the company we partnered with. I think we surveyed internally something in the order of around 200 staff participated, and we had about 600 external people to Epworth participate in the survey. We had focus groups, a number of them internally as well as externally, to try and understand what it was that they saw about Epworth that they found attractive. You know, what was their perception? And that in the first instance, we had a clear view that what we'd end up with would be an overarching value proposition, but that for our critical care nurses and our theatre nurses and perhaps oncology, that there'd be a slightly different value proposition. And so our brief to the company that we partnered with was, we want the overarching EVP, but we want to understand what the compelling value proposition is for theatre nurses and so on and so forth. Through all the research, of which there was an enormous amount, and all of the information that came back to us, their clear view was there was such synchronicity across all of the different groups of people, both internal and external, that it would be better just to have the one overarching EVP. It was probably a good 6 months of work, a lot of consultation, a lot of research, and a lot of internal consultation to arrive at what we saw our EVP was. And concurrent to that, one of the other things we were doing is making sure that whatever that statement looked like, that it was going to be translated into a creative campaign as well that would pique the interest of people both nationally and internationally. We operate in a market where there are critical shortages, particularly in midwifery, theatre, oncology, ICU, critical care.
Fantastic, thanks. Really interesting that you went with one. We're actually doing work with a client that's got a few business units around their customer promise, and they went with one customer promise as well. They found that it covered everything. So through that whole process, did anything come out that surprised you? Is there anything in the EVP that you thought, gee, that wasn't just common sense? I'm surprised that that's such a common...
No, it was really, really interesting. And just as a sideway comment to that, which helps answer it, our marketing department were probably one of the ones I had to work with the hardest to actually convince them of our need for an EVP, because there was, internally, that's one of the learnings for me, not everybody absolutely understands what an employee value proposition is. Their view was strong brand, We know what our entry surveys say, we know what our exit surveys say. People want to come and work with us for, the teaching we offer, the research, those sorts of things. So no surprises there whatsoever. What the EVP did do for us, and that research was identify perhaps areas that we could focus on more, some opportunities for improvement. For example, we're a not-for-profit organisation, but we do work to a surplus budget. We're quite clear about that. And so one of the opportunities for us is making sure that we are somewhat more explicit with our current employees about how we reinvest those funds. So no surprises, but a couple of opportunities for going forward.
Great. Thanks very much, Liz. I think I might move on to Taryn. I'm sure many of you have got questions brewing for Liz. Tricky questions. Liz particularly likes tricky questions, so please do come up with something there. So Taryn, I know you guys have had quite a lot of investment, and unfortunately people want a return on that investment. So as a result, you've had to start rethinking your EVP and what you're doing in the people space. Can you maybe just tell us a bit about your context, what triggered this work and what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's a really good segue from Liz to myself. We're in a very similar situation, I suppose, probably earlier or a lot earlier on the process. So the Victorian government kindly offered or have agreed to invest $338 million in the Melbourne and Olympic Parks precinct, which is really cool. And what that means is a whole heap of new buildings, shiny new toys, I suppose, for us to manage and maintain. So $338 million is obviously a lot of money, and the value of those assets, once they are complete, will become part of Melbourne and Olympic Parks and our responsibility as the management team to run and maintain. What that means for us is our asset base will essentially double. So the value of our business is over the next 5 to 10 years is going to double. But the catch, I suppose, is that those assets are not necessarily going to generate us the equivalent amount of revenue that's going to maintain them and account for the depreciation, etc. Accounting speak, blah, blah, blah. I'm not an accountant. So I'm sorry if anyone is. So that challenge, I suppose, that's that was posed a couple of years ago to us, led us to have a think about and ask us that burning question, very, very similar to yourself. So we probably should have caught up before we got on stage. And I will be picking your brain later. I'll have questions for you. Ask us the question, do we have the capability within our team? We're not going to be growing, so we're not necessarily going to be doubling our staff base, our employment, or the team of people that we employ. Do we have the existing capability within our team to solve the problems and face those challenges that come with double the amount of assets and not necessarily double the amount of revenue? How are we going to, as a business, generate that amount of revenue to sustain our business? And that's the biggest question for us, is around financial sustainability. And from a people perspective, how are we going to attract, how can we retain those quality, high-performing, capable people that can help us solve that problem?
Great, thanks, Taryn.
Yeah.
So in your case, with Liz, she needed quality and quantity.
Yeah.
She needed the right people, but 2,000 more of them.
Yeah.
In your case, is it much more quality?
Quality.
Much more.
Absolutely.
And so what have you been doing?
So from an EVP perspective, as I mentioned, and I'll be completely honest, we are in our very, very early stages. We have only just recognised the need, I suppose. And you're probably asking yourself, why is she here? But I can share some really good insights around influence, and particularly a small management team of about 100 people. So who, as you mentioned before, rely very heavily on business partners to deliver the service to our customers. So the challenge of influencing and integrating more with those business partners and helping them see what the important parts of an employment value proposition are can be can be really challenging. So where we are is what we've done so far is really articulated our direction and that story that I told before in terms of what our business problem is, really defining that and helping our people understand what we are, where we're going and what problems we're facing, and investing in getting the right people in the right roles. That's going to catapult us.
Great, thanks.
to
So there's this imperative to grow revenue because
Absolutely,
even
yeah.
the government doesn't give you money for nothing.
That's right.
Had it not been for that imperative, you probably would have said, life's okay.
We're going
You
all
probably,
right.
there wouldn't have been a trigger to do anything
That's right, yeah.
in this space.
Yeah.
Great, thanks. Now, Ben, you've got a big job, I think. And obviously in a very competitive sector. And you've got to lay out sort of HR strategies that are going to attract and retain the right people. Can you maybe just tell us a bit about your story, your context, and
Sure.
what you guys are doing?
Sure. Thanks, Murray, and good morning to everybody. Maybe a little bit different to my colleagues on stage is just given the size and scope of Wesfarmers and kind of what we do for a living, it's probably just a tad different. But the reality is when dealing with people issues, they're all about the same, frankly. So the context for Wesfarmers is we are a large employer. This year alone, we'll hire about 50,000 people through our ranks. So we're a population of about 205,000. And so the people agenda is kind of current, and always ongoing. So the 50,000 hires-ish, put in perspective, we're heavy in retail, and therefore their seasonal employees turnover is an issue in retail, as a lot of our businesses and so forth. So the people agenda tends to get a lot of conversations in the group. And as Murray said, when you're dealing with a collective payroll of $8 billion, it's a pretty big cost driver. But at the same time, it's a big value driver. If you think about the Coles business, for example, I was mentioning this morning, and hopefully people in the room shop at Coles. We're also in the people business at Coles when you have 100,000 employees, and so getting the people proposition right is critically important. From a Wesfarmers perspective at the group level, the employee value proposition really centers, and we try to have this conversation with all of our business units because we're in this autonomous business approach. Coles can do what they want, Bunnings can do what they want, Office Works to a large extent can do what they want, our coal businesses and so forth. So they're responsible for their own employee value proposition, but at the group level, we keep it pretty simple. We spend a lot of time on managing reputation because in our minds, the reputation is core to honoring our promise both to our stakeholders, our shareholders, our employees, our communities, and so forth. And so we think reputational management has a big impact on the employee value proposition of the group. So we try to deliver on our promises. We spend a lot of time on the leadership agenda. We think it's critically important to get the leadership component right. And if we get that right, everything kind of falls from that to a large extent. So I don't think it's that different in terms of we're trying to grow our businesses. We're always in the market to attract and retain talent. A lot of focus on the people agenda through our strategic planning processes. And so having some of those processes and systems in place and having a rhythm in our businesses around the people agenda is pretty critically important.
Great, thank you. I had a look at your annual report recently, and I was looking for the word employee, so I did a word search, and employee came up 85 times in your annual report, and it's clearly stated, in your strategy, number one is customers, and then number two is employees. How do you see the relationship between employee and customer? And the relative priority, and is there a relative priority between the two?
Well, yeah, we think there's a direct correlation. And so let me just put it in perspective. So if you think about the Wesfarmers Group and going back to the numbers, so there's over 200,000 individuals that work throughout Wesfarmers. I'll get to your question. So the employees thing is pretty important. By our analysis, we employ 1 out of every 60 working Australians. If you do the math, and the number of people that know somebody that work in the Wesfarmers Group and the communities in which we, are currently competing, there's a lot of people that we do touch. And so our stakeholder management around the communities is pretty important. So if we get the people formula right, we think there's a direct correlation with our business performance. And maybe to play that out is a different way to think about it is the CEO of the group, Richard Goiter, he'll spend about a quarter of his time on the people agenda. And so he knows there's a large piece of what he does is around getting the people thing right, because getting the people thing right, will directly result in better business outcomes. So when it's in the annual report 85 times, I haven't done the job. I think we're sincere about it. I think, we don't get it all right, just like every organization. As I tell a lot of people, given the size of Wesfarmers, if you think about Australia, we're a big city. And so we have a lot of issues in our organization, things that we don't like to talk about, but there are things that happen in cities that people don't like to talk about. So we don't always get it right. We do have the turnover issues. We're not always hiring the right people. We're not spending enough money perhaps on the development of talent sometimes. We don't always get our priorities set in terms of let's focus on people versus the customers and so forth. But we try to keep everything from a portfolio perspective about even. So when it says it in the annual report as one data point, we're pretty sincere about it.
Great, thank you. I'm going to just ask each of the panelists, starting with Liz. Liz, one thing that you've learned, one sort of tip that you'd give folks from the work you've been doing over the last couple of years?
For the EVP, I guess the key thing for us would be know what you actually want, particularly if you're partnering with somebody who's actually going to assist you with the research. Be very clear about what you want that to look like at the other end. That's been a big learning for me. We did not have the internal capacity to actually take on this piece of work due to a number of competing priorities. So we did partner with another company. I think I wasn't really explicit enough in terms of what I wanted the end result to actually look like. So that's what I would recommend, and I would say be very clear about what you're wanting them to deliver.
Great, thanks Liz. Taryn, one thing you'd take away from your work so far?
This is probably a little bit controversial. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago, but particularly as we're working with business partners that we're not employed under the same umbrella, or we're not connected other than having a partnership and terms of agreement that you will deliver this service for us. It's actually not about employment. It's about having a proposition that is mutually fulfilling. So we have a site where lots of different people come and go, whether they're public or they work here, and our customers are also working for us, and people working for us are our customers. So it's all a big pot of the same people, really. And it's, as I said, it's actually thinking about it, not actually about employment. High-performing people don't think about employment. They think about what is going to be mutually fulfilling for me. I want to give something to you, and you have something that I like, and I have something that you like, so let's get together and chat about it. So that's really been our position so far.
Thanks, Darren. Ben, one thing you'd give people to think about?
Again, because I'm not spending a lot of time, if I can, just on the employee value proposition. I think in any of these activities and strategies is just be commercial. I think thinking about the business impact on everything you do is pretty important. So we start at the center of why do we exist, is to provide satisfactory returns to our shareholders. So it's the whole concept of how we make money around here and doing it the right way. And if you can bring that to the work you do, why do we exist, I think you'll have a pretty positive impact.
Great, thanks Ben. No, we haven't got time. Is there anyone who'll feel desperately unhappy if they can't ask their question? Final question? Nope? Okay. Well, look, just to say thank you for coming today. Nick Barnett, who's our CEO, couldn't make it today. Unfortunately, he's had a bereavement in the family. So he sends his apologies. I just want to thank our panelists. Thank you so much for taking up your time and being here and sharing your insights with us. We've got a little something for you that I'll
Early morning draw.
give you.
Yeah, exactly.
If you want to be part of the 21st century and do any tweeting, there's a hashtag there, Insync EVP, I believe it is, if you want to tweet. We do also have some research, just a short research paper that you can grab. It's basically a practical how-to guide on how to build an EVP. I suppose my final comment would be, I'm just intrigued by the similarities between an EVP and a CVP. And marketing people writing a customer value proposition know they can't offer everything to everyone. You can't be all things to all people. So you don't try to have the best pay and the best working conditions and the best career development, etc. To be really different. Who was it? It was you, Liz, talking about differentiation, I think it was. To be really different, it's figuring we're going to be fantastic at flexibility and we're going to be fantastic at this. And maybe we won't be so great at that, but for the right people, that'll. So I think that there is going to be, I mean, we're in such a competitive world. We're competing for customers, we're competing for employees, that I think we're going to see more and more of the science of marketing being applied to employees and how we attract and retain employees. So thank you so much for coming. Have I forgotten anything? No? Really appreciate it. And just once again, Taryn, Ben, and Liz, thank you so much.